Welcome. Today, we are taking a deep dive into, well, the inner architecture of belief,
Mhm.
how we perceive our own abilities, why some people seem to walk around with this, quiet certainty, and why others, well, they need a megaphone to announce their existence.
We're really going to be dissecting that entire spectrum of self-perception today. Everything from crippling self-doubt and insecurity.
All the way up to that excessive self-regard we just call arrogance.
Exactly. And our mission here is, I think, pretty ambitious. We want to move past the casual, everyday definitions. We want to unpack what truly drives these behaviors that seem like total opposites.
Insecurity versus arrogance.
Right. And hopefully give you the psychological tools to identify the foundation of, well, true resilient confidence.
And to do that, we absolutely have to start at the core concept, which is the ego. And I think if you only know the word ego as in, oh, that person has a massive ego, you're really missing the point.
You're missing the crucial psychological definition.
We're talking about the fundamental engine that organizes and mediates your entire personality.
That's it. Psychologically, the ego is. I like to think of it as the CEO of the personality.
CEO. Yeah, I like that.
It's not good or bad. It's just the organized sense of self that has this exhausting job of mediating between three conflicting internal forces.
And these forces are constantly battling for control, right, while it's also facing the real world.
All at the same time. It's a tough job.
Okay, so that sounds complicated. Let's break down those three forces the ego is always negotiating with.
Okay, so first you have the ED. This is your instinctual primal desires. It just wants pleasure gratification right now.
So the emotional, demanding toddler.
That's a perfect way to put it. The toddler who sees the cookie and will scream until they get it, consequence-free.
Okay, got it. The ED. What's next?
Then you have the superego. This is your internalized moral compass. It's your rules, your social standards, and it's often copied directly from, say, parents or other authority figures.
So it's the stern, moralizing parent inside your head, prone to guilt and judgment.
Yes, very prone to guilt. So if the id is the impulse to spend your entire paycheck on something you just saw.
Superego is that voice screaming at you that you're a moral failure if you don't save every single penny.
Exactly. And the ego is the rational middle manager stuck between them. It has to figure out, how do I satisfy the needs of this impulsive id without violating the strict rules of the superego, all while, actually functioning in reality?
And when the ego is strong and healthy, it pulls it off.
It pulls it off beautifully. And that leads to rational, practical, socially acceptable decisions.
Okay, so here's where it gets really interesting for personal growth. Why does this deep, sort of theoretical definition matter for someone who's just trying to be a bit more confident or maybe less defensive?
Because a healthy, well-developed ego fosters resilience. I mean, think about it. If your ego is fragile and criticism hits, your entire sense of self, your whole identity can just shatter.
Because the structure is weak.
The structure is weak. But a strong ego knows how to process that criticism. It sees it as data, not as a threat to its very existence. It gives you emotional control.
Which lets you handle stress and bounce back.
Right. So an inflated ego, the one we talk about colloquially, is actually rigid because it can't admit mistakes. It needs that constant validation because deep down, it knows its own structure is weak.
So the arrogance and the defensive-ness, it's just the ego overcompensating for that internal instability.
And conversely, an underdeveloped ego is what creates that fragile identity. That's where you see low self-esteem, impulsiveness, and that feeling of being constantly overwhelmed.
The goal, then, is what psychologists call a quiet ego.
A quiet ego, one that's secure enough that it doesn't need all that constant external noise or validation to prove it's worthwhile. And that inner stability, that's what naturally promotes humility and a real growth mindset.
Humility requires a strong self-structure. That makes so much sense. To see how these states play out in real time, though, we need some kind of diagnostic tool. And this brings us perfectly to transactional analysis, or TA.
TA. Pioneered by Dr. Eric Berne. It's brilliant because it gives you such a clear mental map. Berne proposed that our personality expresses itself through three distinct ego states.
And these act like, what, three different tapes of behavior and feeling that we're constantly switching between?
That's the perfect analogy. Three different tapes.
Okay, let's look at those three tapes, because they seem to dictate whether your confidence is secure or fragile. Let's start with the foundation of true, rational confidence, the adult ego state.
The adult state. This one is focused purely on the here and now. It operates on facts, logic, objective data. realistic assessment.
So confidence that comes from this state is resilient because it's based on evidence.
It's evidence-based.
Mhm.
If you get asked to lead a project, the adult state analyzes it. I have the training for this, or, okay, I need to learn X and Y, but I am capable of doing that.
It's the negotiator. It's the rational core. Now, let's contrast that with the parent ego state. You're saying this is where self-doubt is generated.
This is where it's born.
Hmm.
Because the parent state is running on those internalized values and judgments copied directly from authority figures in our childhood.
And this state splits, doesn't it? It has two different sides.
It does. First, you have the critical parent. This is the inner tyrant, the voice that generates that deep insecurity, saying things like, if you aren't perfect, you are worthless.
Or you always mess this up.
Exactly. But then you have the other side, the nurturing parent. It provides support, but it's often conditional.
I'm proud of you if you finish everything perfectly. The support isn't unconditional.
It's not. And then there's the third tape, the child ego state, which runs entirely on feelings and reactions replayed from childhood.
And this one also divides, showing us both sides of that insecurity coin.
It does. You have the adapted child, which shows up as classic, low confidence, people-pleasing, seeking constant approval, feeling helpless.
And then the free child.
The free child is spontaneous. It's risk-taking. Now, this might look like confidence from the outside.
But it's driven by pure, unchecked emotion. It's impulsive, not based on a realistic assessment of the situation.
Exactly. So if you're trying to build stable confidence, the goal is always to strengthen the adult state. You want to be able to intentionally activate it to evaluate challenges rationally.
Instead of letting the critical parent dictate your self-doubt or the adapted child drive you to just seek approval.
It's a remarkably effective framework. And it's not just for personal development. It's used in leadership training, organizational behavior.
Because it helps you identify which tape a teammate or even a client is playing.
Yes. And it lets you choose your response rather than just reacting from your own inner child or parent.
As we move along the spectrum, we have to talk about the factors that influence where we land on it. Personality is largely set by early adulthood, right?
It is. Childhood experiences, social interactions, the environment you grow up in, they are paramount.
Which explains why having profoundly narcissistic people as key influential figures, a parent, a boss, can have such a devastating destructive impact.
Oh, absolutely. It can set an individual up for a lifetime of internal instability. That formative environment either provides the bricks for a stable ego or it leaves the foundation incredibly shaky.
And at the low end of that spectrum, you have insecurity.
A profound deficit in self-esteem. A fragile, unstable sense of self, marked by this persistent feeling of inadequacy and anxiety about your own worth.
And you mentioned this isn't usually born from one bad moment, it's cumulative.
It's cumulative. Things like early attachment disruptions, critical or neglectful parenting, or that constant social comparison, which is so amplified by social media now.
A highlight reel of everyone else's life.
Exactly. Plus the tyranny of unrealistic perfectionism. All of it creates this feeling of being fundamentally insufficient.
What stands out to me is the paradoxical way this inner fragility shows up.
It's so true. Because the core self is so unstable, it often drives completely contradictory outward behavior. On one hand, you see the withdrawal, the people-pleasing.
The intense need for external validation.
Yes. But then on the other hand, the very same person might throw up this defensive facade that looks for all the world like arrogance, grandiosity, criticism of others.
It's a smokescreen, a strategy to protect that fragile core from being exposed.
And that fragility, it impacts everything. There's a saying, insecurity kills all that is beautiful.
It poisons relationships with jealousy. It stops you from taking risks in your career.
And it's intrinsically tied to anxiety and depression. The only way out is to shift your focus from constantly trying to get validation to building authentic inward strength.
And that strength is what we call healthy self-confidence.
This is the desired state. It's a secure, grounded, realistic understanding of your abilities and your worth. And crucially, a confident person's sense of self is not conditional. It does not rely on external validation.
So they're humble, open-minded, secure.
And their behavior is the opposite of the fragile person. They welcome growth because they know their self-worth is separate from being flawless. They actually listen to feedback.
And they can admit mistakes, not because they're weak, but because they're strong enough to take in new data and use it to improve.
Now let's turn to the other end of the spectrum. Pride and arrogance.
My God.
Pride, in its healthy form, is just satisfaction in a genuine achievement. It's acknowledging the effort and perseverance it took to get somewhere.
That healthy pride is quiet. It reinforces self-respect, and it motivates you to keep improving. But where does it go sour?
It goes sour when that self-worth becomes entirely tied to status or superiority or being better than other people. That's unhealthy pride.
And that fuels defensiveness. You resist any kind of self-reflection.
And when that goes unchecked, it quickly morphs into overconfidence, an exaggerated belief in your ability that significantly exceeds your actual competence.
Overconfidence is dangerous. It leads to reckless decisions, ignoring advice.
And this is where it gets really interesting with the Dunning-Kruger effect.
Right. Explain that one.
The Dunning-Kruger effect is this classic cognitive bias where low-skill individuals dramatically overestimate their competence. The irony is they lack the very awareness and knowledge required to recognize how unskilled they truly are.
They're so far down the curve they can't even see the distance to the top. They don't know what they don't know.
They don't know what they don't know, so they feel supremely confident. But arrogance, or what we call hubristic pride, is a step beyond just simple overconfidence, isn't it?
It feels different.
It is. Arrogance is an exaggerated sense of self-importance that is specifically aimed at diminishing others. It's not enough for them to believe they're superior. They have to actively assert that superiority, often by belittling or dismissing everyone around them.
And here it is. This is the core truth that ties this whole deep dive together. Arrogance is not strength. It is a defense mechanism.
It's a deeply layered compensatory strategy. It's designed to project total superiority to forcibly bury deep-seated feelings of inadequacy.
The truly confident person has no psychological need to prove anything to anyone.
Whereas the arrogant person is in a constant, desperate fight to maintain a false front.
And we see this in its most pathological form with narcissism.
Yes, narcissism is characterized by this highly unstable, fragile self-esteem that must constantly be fed by external validation, what's often called narcissistic supply.
And it really covers both ends of our spectrum. You have the grandiose, overt narcissist, the loud, boastful, arrogant personality.
Whose entire facade collapses into rage or depression the second that external praise is threatened.
But then you also have the vulnerable, covert narcissist.
So it aligns more with insecurity. They're shy, hypersensitive to criticism, may even play the victim, but they're still driven by this hidden sense of entitlement and a deep need to manage their constant shame.
In both cases, the core is exactly the same, a fragile, unstable self.
Which lets us synthesize the crucial distinction here. On the surface, on the behavioral spectrum, you have insecurity, which looks like withdrawal on one end.
And arrogance, which looks like dominance, on the other. They seem like opposites.
But when you look internally, at the core, there are really only two states. Healthy self-confidence stems from a secure, stable internal state, a strong ego.
And critically, both insecurity and arrogance stem from the exact same insecure, fragile internal state. A fragile ego.
Arrogance is just insecurity that decided to go on the offensive.
So to understand how we actually build that secure foundation, we have to look at psychological theories of motivation and self-development, like Bandura's work on self-efficacy.
Self-efficacy is so powerful, it's simply a person's belief in their ability to perform the specific actions they need to achieve a goal.
And Bandura showed that high self-efficacy is basically the engine of motivation.
It is. If you believe you can handle the challenge, you set more challenging goals, you persist much longer through obstacles, and you start to see difficult tasks not as threats, but as opportunities for growth.
This is where we talk about the mastery experience, right? When you successfully push through a difficult challenge, you get a small, tangible win.
And that small win strengthens your self-efficacy.
Which then makes you more motivated to take on the next, slightly harder challenge. It's a self-reinforcing loop that continually builds the resilience of your adult ego state.
And this foundation is also supported beautifully by Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Maslow showed us that personality matures by meeting a sequence of needs.
The lower four levels are the deficiency needs: physiological, safety, love and belonging, and most relevant here, esteem needs.
And when that need for achievement, competence, and recognition is met, it fosters the genuine self-worth that is essential for a resilient personality. If those esteem needs are constantly unmet, the personality stays unstable.
And once those are stably met, we can pursue the ultimate growth need at the top, self-actualization.
The ongoing process of realizing your highest potential. It's a perpetual, intrinsic desire to grow, and it shapes mature personality traits like autonomy and acceptance. The confident person is simply someone pursuing self-actualization from a stable base.
Okay, so if personality is largely set in early adulthood, what's the path forward for us? How do we cultivate that stable adult ego state now?
Well, while the basic framework is established, major growth is absolutely possible. But it requires targeted engagement with your own internal dynamics. It has to start with structured self-reflection.
So when you feel defensive or you feel compelled to boast, you
You
pause.
pause and you ask, is this my adult state assessing data? Or is this my adapted child reacting to criticism? You have to pinpoint the driver.
That's turning theory into real application. And you need external anchors too, seeking genuine, honest feedback from trusted people.
And more importantly, being open to it. Embracing imperfection as data, not as an indictment of your character.
It also helps to cultivate a beginner's mindset, that sense of curiosity and openness, assuming you always have more to learn. It naturally deflates that need for superiority.
A great final point is to focus on contribution, not credit. When you shift your focus from needing validation and attention to just making a genuine impact, the ego's demand for the spotlight naturally quiets down.
That focus on inward strength rather than external applause really is the entire synthesis of this deep dive. Genuine success and fulfillment, they stem from building that authentic inner confidence.
And that stability changes how you navigate the entire world. So here's a provocative thought for you to explore as you move forward. Next time you encounter someone projecting extreme arrogance, dominating a conversation, or belittling others, don't just react to their behavior. Instead, look through it and ask yourself, am I observing genuine inner strength, or am I witnessing a desperate attempt to cover a deeply fragile internal self? That lens, it changes everything about how you interact with people and how you build your own life.